tomorrow will stand alone.
Very vocal opponent of merging, wondering what benefit there would be to merge Dubbo and Wellington. The former mayor of Dubbo, Mathew Dickerson, do you remember that song?
I do remember that song. Thank you for reminding me, Richard.
5 years later, the Deputy Premier says these mergers in part of his patch anyway, Cootamundra and Gundagai, he said, hasn't worked. What's your view now, 5 years later, of the merger between Dubbo and Wellington? Mathew Dickerson, has it worked or not?
Well, I don't see any direct benefit to the residents in Dubbo and Wellington. You can make an organisation work, but the whole idea of amalgamations, Richard, was to make it better. And I don't see any evidence that it's made the overall situation better. Things are still going along. Rubbish is still getting collected. Water's being treated. So things are still happening. So it's not as if everything fell apart. But that's not as a result of the amalgamation. Things just kept ticking away. They put some things together. I don't see any huge cost savings. In fact, I see lots of wasted money because you've now got most of the admin done in Dubbo. Anne Jones, who was the Mayor of Wellington at the time, myself, were very vocal against it. And we said a couple of things. One was that Wellington would lose their voice. And I think they have lost their voice. I don't think you've got anywhere near the sort of representation from Wellington because you've only got 2 Wellington councillors out of a group of 10. So you have to have lost some of your voice there. And then I also used to say 5 years ago that there would be no direct financial benefits to the new merged council apart from a little bit of handouts from the government. Now, the government could have handed that money out anyway. In fact, I remember speaking to the Premier at the time, Mike Baird, and I said, Mike, just hand the money out. Both communities will benefit from the handouts. You don't need an amalgamation to hand money out. But of course, that was to sweeten the deal for people to get them more comfortable with amalgamations. But the core has not changed, Richard. The core of the amalgamation still means that we've got a huge area now for this government or this local government. And it's very hard for any council group to try and administer that whole huge council area.
Did you expect, though, Mathew Dickerson, streets paved with gold and lightning bolts and glory archways into the town? Is that what you expected? I mean, what visible signs of merger did you want to see?
I didn't want to see any visible signs of merger because I couldn't see it working. If you listen to the state government at the time, back around 2014 and then 15, when the discussions were all occurring, then they were saying as if there were going to be streets paved with gold. It was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. I did research at the time, Richard, on a lot of amalgamations that occurred back about 15 years previous to the discussions in early 2000s, for example, and I couldn't find any evidence that those councils that were amalgamated were in any way, shape or form better off than non-amalgamated councils. One of the crucial things in local government is local. And when you start to make council areas that are so big, and look at how big now the Dubbo-Wellington merged council area is, you start to remove a bit of that local out of it. You've got people down on the other side of Wellington that their local natural centre for where they do their business, their shopping, their health services, it's all orange, yet they're part of Dubbo. It seems like they would be going backwards to go to Dubbo because this whole area is just so large. So I didn't expect to see streets paved with gold, but I couldn't see the concept, the logic behind it. And of course, the state government wouldn't at the time. And still now, Richard, 5 years after the amalgamation, still won't release all the detailed analysis that supposedly showed that this was better.
Wasn't that out of KPMG? You and I talked about that at the
Correct.
time. We couldn't see facts and figures. We wanted to see the decimal points somewhere.
If it was so compelling, surely you would say, here's the report that KPMG did for us. Look at how compelling it is. And I actually remember saying to Mike Baird at the time, Mike, you're trying to get us convinced as a community. Give us some data. Give us some information. And I remember he patted me on the shoulder. He said, Matt, just trust me. It's the big picture. Well, where's Mike Baird now? Where's the Deputy Premier at the time, Troy Grant? Where's he gone now? John Barilaro, it's a bit rich for him to come out now and say he's against it. It's his government that did this at the time, and he's sitting at the table, Richard. You and I aren't sitting at the table making these decisions. He's sitting at the table in government, and now he's saying, I don't like these amalgamations, they're not very good. Well, change the decision. You're sitting at the table, John. Make the change.
How hard would it be, though?
Well, it's happening in Queensland. When they've had amalgamations occur in Queensland, then they went and did some referendums to those councils that were merged, and 100% of councils that were given a referendum or council areas actually voted, the residents voted to demerge, and they demerged them. just the same as you can put the two councils together, you could split them apart.
Okay. And Matthew Dickerson, could you use it as a supplementary to the upcoming council vote, the election? Could you put a paragraph saying, do you agree or disagree? Would you like the could we have some sort of supplementary question at the end of the council election?
Absolutely. That would be the logical time to do any plebiscite or any referendum, because you've got everyone going to the polls anyway. I would argue that maybe they've run out of time to do it at this next election, but we know they put these elections off from last year because of COVID-19, so they can change the schedule around. They could easily change the schedule for these elections. Who knows, COVID-19 might have an impact anyway on these elections. So you could do it, but that would be the logical time. Ask the residents. But the residents said clearly last time, Richard, 80% of people in Dubbo and a similar percentage, slightly lower percentage of people in Wellington voted against the idea of the amalgamation then, but the state government ignored it then, and it seems like they're ignoring it now and ignoring their own deputy premier in what they're doing.
Thanks for your time, Matthew Dickerson. We'll see what happens.
Thanks, Richard.
Way up high, democracy will go bye-bye. Dubbo and Wello will stand alone.